What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. I'm Kevin Smith. Today is going to be all about developing mental fortitude. In particular, I'm going to offer 22 different prompts that you can give yourself to kind of identify the areas of life where you may be detracting from your mental fortitude, or the areas of life you may struggle with as a person, some of your character flaws that are potentially going to hold you back. This will be biased towards soft selection prep, in particular Army soft selection prep, since that is my past. That's the thing I have experience with, but these will apply to various different soft selection preps, as well as just becoming a better person in general. So I'm going to go through the 22 prompts, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about why they're important, and you can ask them to yourself, and you can kind of identify areas of life that you need to improve upon. Before we hop into the video, if you don't mind helping the algorithm a little bit by giving it a subscribe, like, sharing it with someone if you find it valuable, or even just leaving a comment. I read all the comments. I try to get back to you guys on all the comments, and I greatly appreciate the support, and it helps the channel grow. And for that, I am forever grateful. Additionally, the prompts that I'm going to give you have nothing to do with training, although indirectly there may be some training aspects, but it's not all about destroying yourself in the gym and taking a David Goggins approach to training. Nothing but respect for Mr. Goggins. But if you just go destroy yourself in training in an effort to build your mental toughness, what you're going to get is, yeah, you might be a little bit more tough, but you're also going to detract from your potential physical preparation progress. It's not going to be sustainable. You might hurt yourself. Best case scenario, you're just not going to make the same type of progress that you otherwise could if you use areas aside from training to actually build your mental fortitude. And I might say mental toughness, I might say mental fortitude throughout the video. Essentially, that's just an all-encompassing term for grit, determination, perseverance, resilience, adaptability, and many other traits that are crucial to be successful in any soft selection process. So let's hop into the first one. How often do I lie to myself? Things like showing up late, things like setting your alarm and not waking up to it, or setting multiple alarms, pressing snooze, having a prepped meal in the fridge, and deciding to go out with the boys and have a Chinese buffet for lunch. Little things like that seem little but aren't actually that little, when compounded over time, will crush your self-confidence and crush your self-esteem. And if you can't hold yourself accountable, guess what? You're going to have to hold other people accountable eventually as you get through these selection processes, pipelines, become a senior member of your team eventually. You're going to be holding other people accountable. And if you can't hold yourself accountable, I can't think of many more hypocritical things to ask other people what you're not willing to do yourself. So that one is huge. How often do you lie to yourself? Be real and be honest with it, and start going to work on fixing it if it applies to you. Which brings us to prompt number 2. How good am I at accepting delayed gratification? In 2024, our world is essentially set up for immediate gratification. When you're bored, you can do any number of things. You can scroll social media. You can watch 25 different YouTube videos in a row. You can binge watch Netflix. Some people eat when they're bored. Some people eat when they're sad, or sometimes people eat when they're anxious, or they drink when they're anxious. All of these are immediate gratifications, immediate pleasure that you get as soon as you start feeling any sort of discomfort or unease. And if you're always giving into them, again, you just make a habit of it and it becomes your regular practice. And in the future, when you go to selection or you go through the Q course, you're going to experience a lot of periods of time where you're not going to get any feedback. You're not going to get any reward. You're not going to get any good job, buddy, or bad job, buddy. It's just going to be neutral. You're going to have to do hard, demanding, arduous work for days and weeks and months on end without even seeing any sort of reward for it. So it's the ultimate practice of delayed gratification. And if you are not used to accepting delayed gratification right now, when you get to the situation where you have to in these various pipelines, you are going to really struggle, and you're going to really have a tough time not getting any feedback, not getting any reward, not getting any relief from the struggle. So now is the best time to start practicing that. Which brings us into number 3. Have I asked anyone close to me about my character flaws? Most of us are good at identifying things we're good at as a human, but a lot of us struggle with identification of the things that we're not great at. But people around you that spend a lot of time with you, especially people who are willing to give it to you straight and be honest with you, oftentimes have a different perception, and they can tell you certain things that you are weak at character-wise. And everyone has character flaws. Everyone has character weaknesses that could be brought up. But if you don't have the humility to accept the fact that you probably do have some flaws that you're not aware of, and then take the next step and go ask someone close to you, your spouse, your sibling, your best buddy, your coworker, your parent. It could be multiple of these people. Ideally, it probably would be, because you can start picking up trends. This will give you something to work from. It'll allow you to identify what you suck at, and then you can go find resources and do activities and put yourself in situations where you can actually practice these things you suck at and bring them up. Otherwise, you're just not going to know what you suck at. And when you're on team week, or when you're at a selection, you're smoked, hungry, tired, poopy faced, these character flaws that may otherwise kind of be a little minor thing that don't really affect you all that much in everyday life when conditions are good, when conditions are bad, they're going to be magnified. And if you're going to a selection process that has some sort of team aspect, or if you're going into a soft unit that's always going to have some sort of team aspect, and you have these character flaws, and when you're stressed out, they rear their ugly heads, and you've never identified them, then that's going to hurt you in the future. So ask someone close, have some humility, and start identifying so you can start working on bringing up your character flaws. Which brings us to number 4. Do I skip things if I'm not feeling motivated to do them? So maybe you made a commitment for somewhere down the road, and you get to that point. Maybe you decide, I'm going to go work out tomorrow at 11 a.m. 10:45 rolls around the next day, and you just don't feel like it. Your motivation is non-existent. And that's totally normal. Not everyone's motivated all the time. You can't expect to be motivated all the time. But if you can make decisions based on what the right thing to do is versus the wrong thing to do, rather than whether you feel like doing something or you don't feel like doing something, you're going to almost build that muscle, that discipline muscle, that in the future, when you're forced to do something that you don't want to do, newsflash, you're going to be asked to do a lot of things you don't want to do throughout selection, the pipeline, etc. You're going to be able to do it anyway, because it won't be an emotion-based, motivation-based decision. It'll be, this needs to get done, so no matter what, I'm going to do it. So if you find yourself doing things based on whether you feel like it or not, or only doing the right thing when you feel motivated to do it, start practicing now, taking feelings out of it, taking emotion out of it, and doing it regardless. Which brings us to number 5. How many dopamine seeking vices do I have, and what can I do to get better? Again, 2024, we have lots and lots of things that result in immediate gratification, aka immediate pleasure, and dopamine hits. Dopamine is a finite resource, so we have a limited amount that we can use every single day. The good thing is, if you use it wisely, if you, what I call, leverage it, you can use it to go through struggle and embrace difficult times and come out the other side and actually put hard effort into things. That results in a nice, steady drip of dopamine, and it's actually rewarding at the end, rather than what most people do, spend all day getting these really cheap, quick dopamine hits that don't require any effort. So scrolling social media, binge watching TV shows, drinking, eating processed foods that aren't on their plan, gambling, porn, things like that, that result in immediate pleasure, but there's no effort required to actually attain that pleasure or that gratification. So if you're doing things all day long that result in these little dopamine hits, you're going to expend all your dopamine. You're not going to feel like doing anything difficult, but also you're just not going to feel good about yourself. And a lot of people just get into these cheap dopamine cycles where they just can't bust out of it, and they wonder why they're not motivated, or they wonder why they can't stick to anything. And it's probably because they're just expending their dopamine on these very cheap fixes. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of humility to identify the things that you succumb to, but it is a massive thing to tackle if you want to get to a place where you don't rely on these super cheap dopamine hits to make yourself temporarily feel better. Which brings us to number 6. How often do I seek out situations of discomfort? So in case you weren't aware, there are going to be a lot of situations throughout your training, your pipeline, your selection processes, even your career, where you're not super comfortable. Pretty much the entirety of selection, the Q course, as well as the job, is almost all situations where you're not super comfortable. If you never practice getting uncomfortable, if you never force yourself to do things that are outside your comfort zone, then you're going to really, really struggle, because it's just going to be a foreign concept to you by the time you actually get there, and you have no other opportunity. So everyone's a little bit different in the things that make them uncomfortable. For example, a lot of people will say, oh, I just go to the gym and train really hard. Well, if you enjoy training, then that doesn't count. That is not something that's outside your comfort zone. That may be outside of someone else's comfort zone, but it has to be personalized based on you. If you are uncomfortable talking to strangers, go talk to strangers. If you're uncomfortable public speaking, go to Toastmasters and actually get better at it and get more comfortable with it. If you feel like you're just too comfortable in general, do things like take a cold shower or hop in an ice bath, or even something as simple as just sitting without your phone for 10 minutes and just being bored and being okay with it. All those things are options to improve your ability to embrace discomfort. And that is an ace that you're going to really want up your sleeve when you get to these inevitable situations of discomfort throughout the pipeline. Which brings us to number 7. Do I like the idea of being in SOF, or do I actually want to do the job? The job versus the title. Do you want the title of being a cool SOF guy, or do you want to actually go do the shit that SOF has to do? For every special operator, there are thousands of people who wanted to be special operators at one point or another. There are thousands of people who told their friends, who set this commitment to go be in SOF. And then when it came time to do actual SOF shit, they didn't like that idea so much anymore because they actually had to do the hard things required to get there. So I had an 18 Charlie on my old team that had a spin-off of the old Ronnie Coleman quote, everybody want to be a bodybuilder, but don't no one want to lift no heavy ass weight. He would say everyone wants to be SF, but no one wants to do SFE shit. And that is absolutely the case because SFE shit sometimes, although some of it is awesome, most of the time, it's not that exciting. You get to see these little clips of jumping out of planes and doing CQB, doing night ops with helicopters, fast roping, riding Zodiacs, things like that. Some of those things do suck. They look cool on videos, but that's like a very tiny percentage of what the job entails. So most of it is just not super flashy or super awesome or super rewarding, but you still have to go do it. And if you just like the idea of wearing a green hat or having a trident on your uniform, then you're probably not going to last very long. So you really want to take a deep look at whether you actually want to do the job or whether you just want the job title. Which brings us to number 7. How do I spend my weekends? Do I spend it improving myself, or do I spend it wasting a bunch of time taking myself further away from my goals? Show me your weekend and I will show you your potential future success. The weekend is 48 hours that you're never going to get back. And if you spend that time drinking, staying up late, sleeping in, skipping your workouts, eating a bunch of food that doesn't support your goals, spending 8 hours every Sunday on the couch watching football, nothing inherently wrong with doing those things occasionally, but you have that time on the weekends. Most people don't work on the weekends. Of course, if you have a different schedule, this may not apply to you, but your non-working days, you can spend that time pulling ahead of the competition because most people spend weekends just kind of dreading the next work week and getting the work week out of them. And usually the activities that they do on the weekend are not conducive to where they say they want to be. So how are you spending your weekends? Are you wasting a bunch of time, or are you spending those 48 hours bringing yourself closer to whatever goal you may have in life, whether it is improving your fitness, health, or whether it's improving your knowledge base or your skills or your character? Spending your weekends doing those things is going to give you a massive leg up on the people that don't spend their weekends doing those things. Which brings us to number 9. Do I use imposter syndrome as a cop-out, or do I accept it as par for the course and use it as a catalyst to continue crushing? So imposter syndrome is everybody's favorite cop-out in 2024. No matter what, if you're driven to achieve and you want to chase big goals, you're going to feel imposter syndrome probably throughout the entire time. Imposter syndrome basically means you don't feel like you're qualified to be doing what you're doing or to be saying what you're saying. And pretty much everyone feels it to some degree. But a lot of people just use it as a cop-out for poor performance, and it's not going to get you anywhere. No one cares if you feel imposter syndrome. What people care about is that you show up and you get your job done, whatever that job may be. So if you accept it as par for the course, you're going to feel it regardless, unless you're a narcissist or unless you are someone that just is kind of okay coasting through life, which if you're watching this video, you're probably not, and use it as a catalyst to improve performance, to drive you to do better, to drive you to build new skill sets, to drive yourself to do things when you don't want to do them and continue to improve, then you're going to be a lot better off than those who just use imposter syndrome as, oh, I feel imposter syndrome, so I'm just going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop trying because what's the use? I just feel like an imposter. So those are pretty much the only two options. You can either choose to use it as a catalyst, or you can choose to use it as something that just crushes you and makes you one of those guys that once wanted to be something great, but decided that it was just too much. Which brings us to number 10. How many books, articles, YouTube videos, podcasts, etc. have I consumed on mental fortitude, character, fitness, health, or any area of life that you want to improve? The great thing about the modern world is there's an abundance of resources and individuals that we can use to learn and better ourselves and expand our knowledge base and expand our capabilities. But a lot of people go about their day-to-day just kind of hoping that they're going to get better instead of actually learning how to get better and then implementing what they learn. If you claim that you just don't know enough about fitness, or you claim that you don't know enough about developing fortitude or character traits or really whatever it is, there are tons of resources out there. And if you're just not using them, then you are just going to continue to not be competent in those areas. But luckily, if you do use them, you're going to be at a massive advantage. And oftentimes you don't even have to pay anything. Oftentimes these are cost-free resources that you can use, so long as you follow through with the next one, which is number 11. Do I actually implement what I learned from these resources, or do I just read them, check the block, and move on? I've always said that you are much better off mastering and implementing everything you learn from 10 of the best books or resources out there than you are reading 500 books just one time, just to read them and then moving on to the next one and bragging about how many books you read and how much knowledge you have. Gaining knowledge is, of course, part of the process of improvement, but just equipping yourself with that knowledge and not doing anything about it, not taking any action, is literally just a form of entertainment. If you're listening to a self-development podcast, or if you're reading some sort of self-development book and you just read it and you don't do anything about it, you don't implement it, then what good is it? You're someone who now knows more about it, but you don't actually use the information in it to improve yourself. So make sure that you are not only consuming, but also using what you consume, and you're going to be a whole lot better off. And it's going to be an actual self-development activity rather than just entertainment. Which brings us to number 12. Am I the person that my friends and family can count on when they're in a pinch? There will be times throughout soft selection, your pipeline, and then later once you get to a team, where you're going to have to be counted on. You're going to have to be trusted. And right now, if you can't be counted on by your friends, your family, to help them out when they need it, or even better, help them out even if they don't ask for it, go out of your way to give them some assistance when they're in a pinch, whether you're helping your buddy move, or your buddy's car breaks down an hour away from your house and he calls you to get a ride and you go get him, or your family is going through something and they need your support. Can they trust you to be the one that actually shows up, whether it's emotionally or physically or financially or whatever it may be, to give them their assistance or not? If not, you might want to start working on it, because eventually, like I said, you're just going to be trusted to help people out, whether you want to or not. And like anything, this can be practiced and it can be developed. In my opinion, the sign of a great individual, a great man, a great human, is somebody that will give you their shirt off their back and show up when you need to, even if it's not convenient for that person. Which brings us to number 13. Do I still hang out with people who bring me down? The world right now is full of people who bitch, moan, complain, gossip, talk shit, coast through life just accepting mediocrity. And it's really hard to find people who are driven, motivated, determined for high levels of success and willing to go the extra mile and do the extra work. And the way they talk is positive and it brings you up and it supports you. So what does your friend group look like? Is it the friend group that's going to rub off on you negatively and bring you down? Or is it the latter, the ones who are going to support you and motivate you and push you to go and be successful and not accept mediocrity? Hanging out with the latter people is going to make you a better person. It's going to make you more likely to want to go chase your goal to eventually become a member of special operations. If you hang out with a bunch of people who accept mediocrity and maybe try and like covertly undermine your goals or don't support you, they're going to gladly accept you back when you come back after failing or after quitting. So make sure you are curating your friend group, the people you hang out with the most, because it's going to make a big difference in your potential outcomes. Which brings us to number 14. Do I always need to be right, or can I accept being wrong? This, in my opinion, has become somewhat of an epidemic. It's very, very common on social media. People just can't accept when they're wrong, when they're incorrect about something. They can't accept responsibility for being wrong. There will be times throughout pipelines, selection processes, etc., where you're going to be in the wrong. There will be even other times where you're not fully in the wrong, but you're just better off accepting the fact that someone else thought you were wrong and you just going with it and continuing to drive forward. Nobody is right 100% of the time, but a lot of people think that they're a special case or they're an exception to the rule, that they're always right and no one else could ever be more right than them, or nothing they could ever say is incorrect, and it just goes. And it absolutely will eat away at you. It'll make you a shitty person to be around, and it'll also reduce your chances of being successful in selection courses and pipelines where sometimes you are going to be in the wrong. And accepting that taking responsibility for it, learning from your mistakes, putting it behind you, and continuing is the best way to go about it, rather than trying to fight your way and persuade people into thinking that you're right when you actually are not correct. So accepting being wrong, huge skill, very, very important for any aspect of life, not just soft. Which brings us to number 15. How do I take criticism? Do I have thick skin or do I take it personally? You are going to be watched like a hawk throughout selection. You're going to be watched like a hawk throughout the Q course, and you're going to be expected to perform, and you're going to be expected to do it at a high level, regardless of how you feel, regardless of the conditions, regardless of the resources you've been given. You've got to get it done. And sometimes you're going to mess up. That is just part of the process of getting better. Because the stakes of a job in special operations are very high, sometimes even life or death, when you mess up, you're going to receive criticism. Some people choose to take that criticism personally, like it's a hit to them as a person, or again, they're going back to the last one, they just think they're right no matter what. And when you do that, you don't actually hear the criticism. You hear what you perceive to be a personal attack on you, and you don't get any better. So if you can't take criticism, this may not be the best job for you, but you can practice taking criticism by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations that you might mess up and then having someone give you feedback on it. Lots and lots of different opportunities to do this throughout your life. It definitely involves leaving your comfort zone, leaving your house probably, but there are opportunities out there to go and fuck up and receive criticism. And the more you can actually take that constructively and use it to improve yourself, the better off you're going to be in the future. If you can't, then you're really going to struggle and not have a very long career in special operations. Dovetailing off that one, am I easily offended by people, ideas, and even inanimate objects? Again, 2024, the hotness is to become offended. People love to seek out opportunities to feel offended and subsequently tell the person or the thought or the idea or other people about how offended they are. When you are around a bunch of very type A, high achieving, hard charging, ball busting individuals, you're going to be around situations that would offend a lot of people. So if you're someone who's very, very easily offended, it's not going to be very smooth sailing for you, and you're going to really struggle with getting your job done because you're just always going to be offended. However, if you don't take things personally, or if you don't go out of your way to become offended by things, you're just a little bit more even keeled, you're a little less soft, and a little bit more okay with things that maybe you don't agree with, you're going to develop that thick skin that is required to be successful and enjoy yourself when you're doing these arduous selections, when you're training throughout the pipeline, and then finally when you actually get to an ODA. So if you find yourself getting offended, especially if you find yourself voicing the fact that you're offended, whether you're actually voicing it with your voice or you're on your phone typing how offended you are, stop doing that yesterday and start having a little thicker skin and stop being so soft. Which brings us to number 17. Do I always wait for the conditions to be right before I start something? Oh, I'm going to start my diet on January 1st. I'm going to make these New Year's resolutions, but not till New Year's. I'm going to start this workout plan once my schedule kind of dies down a little bit. I'm going to stop drinking after these 3 weddings that I'm about to go to. I'm going to start reading this book once I have a little bit more time. Those are all examples of trying to wait for this arbitrary time where you think conditions are going to be perfect to start something when you could easily just start it right now or today or as soon as you humanly possibly can. Because newsflash, conditions are never going to be perfect for anything. Lots and lots of people have success in lots of different areas of life despite imperfect conditions. And if you're always just waiting for that perfect time, that, by the way, is never going to exist, you're never going to get to where you want to go. You're never going to actually start moving towards becoming more successful in really any area of life. You're going to have a lot of different situations throughout your soft career where conditions are not perfect, yet no matter what, you still have to perform, and you still have to perform at a high level, and other people are going to rely on you to perform at a high level despite very, very shitty conditions. So practicing that now, if you have a list of a couple things that you've wanted to start, but you've just been waiting around for, start them today. Start them right now if you possibly can, because the conditions aren't going to be perfect and you need to get better at starting things with imperfect conditions. Which brings us to number 18. Do I accept responsibility for everything that happens to me, or do I try to shift the blame elsewhere? Another huge epidemic is not accepting responsibility for what happens to you. Even if something isn't your fault, it's still your responsibility. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Probably not your fault, but guess what? The way you react to it and what you do thereafter is your responsibility. You can either let it ruin your day, you can overreact and maybe cut in front of them and cut them off and potentially create another dangerous situation. Or you can just accept the fact that that happened to you, and the fact that someone else should not determine the scope of what the rest of your morning looks like or the rest of your day looks like. Accepting responsibility, accepting ownership of your mistakes, as well as on the next level, accepting the mistakes of others around you that you are responsible for, even if you didn't make the mistake yourself, is massive. And a lot of people just don't like taking responsibility because it puts the onus on themselves and it makes them actually have to look deep inside themselves and go to work on fixing whatever they messed up. And it's a huge, huge problem. So accepting ownership of everything that happens to you and everything that you do is a non-negotiable trait to have for a successful completion of the soft pipelines, the soft selection processes, as well as your future as a soft operator. Which brings us to number 19. Am I consistent with basic things like my sleep, my nutrition, my stress management, my outside the gym habits? A lot of people look for their training. Like, how can I train as hard as possible to become mentally tough and have mental fortitude, when they can't even consistently get a solid night of sleep? They can't even consistently string 3 weeks of training together. They can't consistently not have a massive cheat meal every single week. Those are very basic things that are difficult to stick to because you have to stick to them 24/7, basically. You can't just decide when to turn it on and turn it off. But if you can't stay consistent with them, how are you supposed to stay consistent really with anything that's difficult or anything that is challenging and demanding in your entire life? So believe it or not, a great way to build fortitude is to make these commitments to yourself with your nutrition, your sleep, training habits, stress management habits, and actually stick to them and practice them and do them, again, whether you feel like doing them or not. In my opinion, as a coach to a lot of guys preparing for soft, sleep is by far the most important one on this list because it's the most commonly brushed off as like, oh no, you know what? I'm good to go with sleep. Consistently sleeping around the same time every night and waking up around the same time every single day and making sure there's about 8 hours, give or take, in between those two times. Finding someone who does that on a consistent basis is incredibly uncommon. And of course, that requires sacrifice. It requires FOMO. It requires maybe missing out on some enjoyable activities at nighttime, or sometimes just getting up when your alarm goes off, even though you're still tired. That's very, very difficult to do pretty much every single day. And by doing that, you're making yourself tougher and better at doing what's right and wrong rather than doing what you feel like doing in the moment. So stick to the basics. You will absolutely develop a high degree of mental fortitude. It does not sound like much, but it absolutely is crucial. And as an added bonus to these things, it's also going to improve your physical performance rather than using training to develop your mental toughness, but it detracts from your physical performance. Which brings us to number 20. Do I make emotion-based decisions or do I make decisions based on rational thought? Tying back to, I believe it was number 4 with the motivation thing. Do you decide things based on whether you feel like doing them, or do you decide to do things whether they are what needs to be done or not? Emotions are a totally normal part of life, and some people make a lot of their decisions based on their emotions. Stoicism, which is usually incorrectly defined as not having emotions or not showing emotions, actually means you still have emotions. You just don't make that decision based on what the emotion is. You identify the emotion, you separate it from what's right and wrong, and you do what's right no matter what. Almost no one is perfect in this regard, and I wouldn't say that being perfect in this regard is even necessary. But if you are always making decisions based on what you feel in the moment, whatever emotion you feel in the moment, you are going to make some really, really bad decisions, and that could be potentially costly at some point in your future in soft. Which brings us to number 21. If someone were to spend every single waking hour with me for a full week, would they be able to tell if I am sad, happy, depressed, motivated, unmotivated, etc.? This is something I have written as a sticky note on my computer because, tying back to the last one, other people should not be able to tell whether you're having a good day, a bad day, a mediocre day, you're super motivated, you're super sad, based on your actions and your performance throughout the day. You should be able to, on a great day or a bad day, get done what needs to be done. On a great day, it's probably going to be more enjoyable. You're probably going to have a better time doing it. But on a bad day, you still do it. It just may be a little bit more of a struggle. It may be a little bit less enjoyable. But if you imagine there was a camera crew following you around 24/7 and you act as if you don't want them to be able to know whether you're having a shitty day or a great day, you are going to have a lot more great days. And even if you don't have a great day, you're still going to get what needs to be done on that day done. When you're at selection, when you're going through the Q course, there are going to be some great days, there are going to be some bad days. But guess what? Regardless of what type of day it is, you still have to show up and you have to perform to standard. So why not practice that now? You can't expect to always have great days, but you can absolutely. You're in control of what you do about it. And the best thing to do is continue moving forward regardless of how you feel. And the last one, but not least, is do I talk to myself like I would talk to a close friend, or do I talk to myself like I'm my worst enemy? This is something I have struggled with quite a bit, is negative self-talk. And I don't really buy into the fact that you need to be like shouting affirmations like I'm a great person in the mirror. But being a little bit less critical of yourself and actually noticing things that you do well and congratulating yourself, giving yourself some credit can be massive. So if you're always just talking shit about yourself in your head, how do you expect to perform well? How do you expect to show up and be confident and go crush things? It's very, very difficult to overcome that. So this takes a lot of practice. You're probably going to have to intentionally go out of your way. If you're used to negative self-talk like I am, you're going to have to intentionally go out of your way to practice talking to yourself like you would talk to a really good friend. If you fuck up, instead of telling yourself you're a piece of shit and you suck and you're never going to get it right, imagine that your friend fucked up. How would you talk to them? Would you tell them they're a piece of shit and they sucked and they're never going to get it right? Probably not. Be like, hey man, that didn't go very well, but it's not the end of the world. No one died. Nothing terrible happened. This can be bounced back from. What did you learn from that? And how can you continue to move forward? Talking to yourself like that is going to allow you to have just a better overall outlook on life. It's going to improve your psyche, and it's also going to improve your performance because you can use your own constructive self-criticism rather than self-sabotage and just talking shit about yourself to your advantage and be successful in the many things that you're going to do in preparation for at selection as well as throughout the pipeline. So if you have the tendency to talk negatively about yourself, the easiest solution that I have found is to intentionally start thinking of yourself as a really dear friend and start talking to yourself like that. So when you mess up, you're not bringing yourself down. You're actually giving yourself something to learn from and improve and carry on and be better in the future. So that wraps it up, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed those 22 prompts. Hopefully you can get something good out of that and start implementing these things into your life. Identify the potential shortcomings that you may see in yourself and get to work on it. My challenge to you is to actually take this video, take some time, and actually implement rather than just consume. Actually take some time, put the work in, identify the areas that you struggle in, and go get better and go crush selection. So appreciate the support. I'll be back soon with another video. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great holiday season. Later.